I mean, know what I love more than literally anything else on this entire planet? Giant monsters are beating the shit out of each other.
Hell yeah. Debuting in 1954, Godzilla is the absolute king of the giant monster genre, having starred in over 30 movies as of the writing of this script, with the newest film, Godzilla King of the Monsters, coming out in just about a week.
And in the spirit of the absolutely agonizing week or so I have left waiting for the new movie, I thought it was a good time to look at some Godzilla games. You know, because gaming channel.
There are a lot of Godzilla games dating back to this 1983 unlicensed Commodore 64 game. Let's not talk about this. The most well-known Godzilla games nowadays are probably the trilogy of fighting games by Pipeworks Software, or maybe the fairly recent PS4 game, which are all pretty fun, but I want to take things in a more retro direction this time around. But even then, there's so much to cover, so let's narrow it down just a little bit further than that.
Classic Nintendo consoles, specifically those pre-GameCube. And we're not looking at every single game released for these consoles, because that would be a very expensive endeavor and a massively inconvenient one for me. We're looking at the ones that I had easy access to for this video, specifically titles that would be known to us here in North America. The first game we're going to be looking at is Godzilla Monster of Monsters for the NES. Title's a little redundant, I guess, but yeah, whatever, let's get started.
The game's basically a side-scrolling beat-em-up starring Godzilla and Mothra. The fact that there are two playable characters is pretty neat, and the monsters themselves look great. I do question the other graphics a little though. The game's set across the solar system, which is just kind of a weird choice. Wouldn't making each level be a different Earth city make more sense so that we can destroy some buildings and stuff? Instead we destroy whatever this is. At least there's a decent amount of moves to use though. Godzilla can punch and kick with the A and B button respectively. He can also duck, which lets you do a tail swipe. Pressing up makes you jump, which looks like this. The atomic breath is mapped to the start button for some reason, which is a little weird, but I mean, it wouldn't really be a good Godzilla game if you couldn't use it, so whatever. Honestly, these side-scrolling bits are pretty boring, and it's just a lot of mashing the punch button and holding right. The monster fights are pretty fun though, once you get to them.
Though the actual process of doing that is pretty weird and shitty in and of itself.
The game has this weird chessboard map screen thing you have to use to get Godzilla around. Like, every space you land on is a side-scrolling stage, basically, and obviously going up to a monster lets you fight them. Again, though, the actual monster fighting is pretty fun, if very button-mashy. You can get stun-locked by Gojira in the first fight, which is kind of weird, but in contrast, you can also stun-lock Mogera, so I'd say it balances out.
Wait, Mogera and Gojira? Talk about going obscure, man. Like, Gojira was never in a Godzilla movie, and though Mogera did show up in Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, that was like 6 years after this game came out. Like, I'm all for obscure things, but that's like having an X-Men game where they fight the obscure Spider-Man villain Big Wheel. It's not technically wrong, but it's really, really weird, okay?
Well, regardless, you do fight more familiar monsters as the game goes on, including staples like King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, and Gigan. And each stage adds more and more monsters until eventually the level is absolutely flooded with non-stop monster encounters. That is, if you ever get that far, because while the game is average at worst up to this point, there's an element I haven't gotten into yet.
And its name is Mothra. Fuck Mothra. Like I said earlier, I'm all for multiple characters, but in this case, I lied. Mothra fucking sucks.
She plays more like a side-scrolling shooter, except her projectile barely goes anywhere, and every time she gets hit, she is sent down to the bottom left corner of the screen. That's kind of an issue because she is fucking massive and she gets hit a lot. She basically makes the game unplayable, which wouldn't be an issue, except here's the thing.
To complete an area and move on, you have to get both monsters to this endpoint, which means no matter what, you have to play as Mothra. A lot. And that sucks.
I just used passwords to skip around. I could not be bothered. Damn it, Mothra, you ruined everything!
The game got a sequel called Godzilla 2: War of the Monsters. I actually don't own this one. It's like $100, and I'm sorry, it just wasn't worth it for this video, so I emulated it. I'm personally opposed to emulation, but the fuck they gonna do, arrest me?
Despite being touted as a sequel, this game is actually a totally different beast, playing as a weird turn-based strategy game where you, the military, have to fight the various monsters across a bunch of preset scenarios. It's really basic stuff, with different monsters having different properties, strengths, and weaknesses, depending on who they are. The music is really annoying, but aside from that, it's mostly harmless other than the combat system. You'd think it would just be stat-based like any other turn-based game, but nope, instead, it's a slot machine, of all things.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, strategy games aren't my forte, but doesn't having a slot machine, making luck the determinant factor in a strategy game, defeat the point of a strategy game because you can't strategize?
Yeah, that and the fact the game is basically the most shallow thing on Earth make me say it's probably not worth your time. It's mostly harmless, and honestly, it can be fun, but only if the RNG doesn't make it literally unbeatable, so yeah, it's pretty bad.
Next up, moving over to the Game Boy, we have one simply titled Godzilla. It actually came out before Godzilla 2, but, like, what the fuck you gonna do about it?
This one starts off with a pretty stellar look at the monster cast looking dead on to their movie counterparts, followed by this. It's cute. I like it. Honestly, if you can get past seeing these badass giant monsters as little chibi things, this game is easily the best one we've looked at so far. You play as Godzilla, obviously, and you gotta climb up vines or ladders or whatever, push around rocks, and defeat monsters in order to try to save your son Manila. Man, I fucking hate Manila.
Yeah, this is kind of unrelated, but just fucking look at him, man. Like, who asked for this? Yeah, he's disgusting. Who wanted this? I didn't.
This game is actually a sequel to another game exclusively released in Japan for the MSX called Gojira-Kun, which has the same basic gameplay and art style as far as I can tell, although the US version advertises itself like this very serious monster game, and I find that kind of baffling, to be honest, but it's pretty funny. All you really do here is break all the rocks in the stage to open the exit. It's basically a puzzle game, and a damn fun one, if a little repetitive and very difficult. The enemy monsters all have different properties, and if you take too long, King Ghidorah comes down and just murders you. It's got like 64 total levels arranged in a maze that you have to try and navigate, so it's really lengthy too, if a little bit confusing. Overall though, it is a rock solid game, pun entirely intended, and one that I recommend if you're looking for a fun time on the Game Boy.
There's another one on Game Boy called Kaiju o Godzilla, but I don't own it. It was only released in Japan, and I'm just mentioning it so someone doesn't mention it to me in the comments. It might be good, I don't know. What I do know is that we did see Godzilla's big transition to 16-bit with Super Godzilla on the Super Nintendo.
If you want to talk about good first impressions, look no further than Super Godzilla. That title screen with the gorgeous 16-bit rendition of Godzilla's theme as the camera pans up, showing off a beautifully created Godzilla sprite roaring over the logo as the military march kicks in. Hell yeah, that is dope as fuck.
You know what's not dope as fuck? Super Godzilla, unfortunately.
Yeah, this one's weird. You basically navigate Godzilla, represented by a blue dot, across a map as you try to find a monster to fight. The graphics on the top of the screen, while very nice to look at, are pretty much just decoration. It's all about that map, and oh my god is it slow. It does let you destroy buildings at least, which is surprisingly a first for any of these games, but it actually damages the player. That's fucking stupid.
Man, I just want a game where you can make Godzilla break some buildings. What did I do to deserve this?
Eventually, you might make your way to a monster, and then it gets even weirder. See, this may look like a basic 2D fighter, but it's not. I have no idea what this is. You basically have to move up to the enemy, like Ghidorah here for example, punch him, and back up as soon as you can to select an attack. You should try to time it when your fighting spirit, this randomly moving energy bar on the bottom, is at its peak so you have maximum access to various moves. After selecting a move, an admittedly really cool animation will play out and finally damage the enemy monster. But be careful because the monster will also do the same to you, except they always have a much easier time because they aren't struggling with the game's janky controls. Basically this sucks and makes no sense. Is it the worst game so far? Yeah, probably.
It wasn't the last Godzilla game released on the Super Nintendo, though, at least in Japan. I know I said I'm going to be sticking to American releases in this video, but this one's a little bit different.
Nintendo Power issue number 72. Bam! There it is, advertised and reviewed for a US release, which never fucking happened, but whatever, close enough. Godzilla Destroy All Monsters was released in Japan in 1994, and holy shit, a game I actually understand how to play?
It was released at the height of the fighting game boom of the early 90s and more or less plays exactly like Street Fighter, but hey, basic fun monster fighting. How did it take this long to get here?
I don't really have a lot to say about this one. It's a pretty decent fighter with a pretty decent lineup of kaiju to choose from. Basically just the usual suspects, but hey, being able to beat the shit out of monsters is why I want Godzilla games to begin with. The graphics and sound are once again pretty excellent, about on par with Super Godzilla, and I love having the appropriate music play when battling various monsters. It doesn't really do anything else to stand out from the crowd in terms of gameplay mechanics, but hey, it works and it's a good time for Godzilla fans. Consider me impressed.
It's just really weird to me that we got Super Godzilla, as strange and baffling as it is, but not the very basic popular style fighting game.
Well, whatever. So far, I'd say this and Godzilla on Game Boy are well worth your time if you can find them for cheap, but even then, the Game Boy game isn't really what most people want out of this character. Well, maybe in this case, America can do it better than Japan. Godzilla the series was an animated show based off the 1998 remake of Godzilla, a film I find absolutely baffling.
Like, you take a character as distinct and as iconic as Godzilla, and you say, nah, fuck it, let's make this instead. Like, I don't know, I have nothing against the Zilla design as it's referred to these days, but I do think it's really weird. Regardless of your thoughts on the movie and that version of the character though, the animated series that it spawned was actually pretty cool, and it had some video games. I only have one of them here. Godzilla, the series Monster Wars for the Game Boy Color. Its predecessor is also on the Game Boy Color, and they're more or less identical.
And in this case, that's unfortunate because, man, this is just nothing. It's kind of a side-scrolling shooter, I guess. You play as Godzilla, or Zilla if you prefer in this case, walking from left to right, firing little green fireballs at enemies. The sprite for Zilla Jr. here looks pretty good, but oh my god, this game is so empty. He just wanders at like 4 miles per hour off to the right, shooting slow-moving projectiles, and that's it. That's the game. This is one of the most boring things I've ever played, and somehow there's 2 games of this? No thanks. This is bad.
Final game we have here is Godzilla Domination for the Game Boy Advance. It's actually the companion title to Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee on the GameCube, and it was developed by WayForward, the studio probably best known for creating Shantae, and you know what? That's a very good sign.
And yeah, no, that faith is not misplaced. This is easily the best game we're looking at today. It's a cartoony fighting game played from sort of a beat-em-up camera perspective. There aren't a ton of characters to play as, and some of them look a little weird, but in general, the sprite work is great, as you'd expect from WayForward, and this game is just damn fun to play. Hitting enemies feels so incredibly satisfying here, totally making up for how button-mashy it kinda gets. The levels are massive, so you really get to run around and destroy a lot of buildings, something that none of the other games really let you do for some reason. There are power-ups that make things go totally nuts too, and the core gameplay is just so strong that it makes up for the relative lack of content, especially since it's a handheld game. And all that's without going into the multiplayer, which, to be honest, I haven't gotten to try. I recorded all this Game Boy content on my Retron 5, so I'm limited to just single player, which is all presented by this hilariously busty reporter character. Very WayForward, I must say, but honestly, it sort of just fits. The final boss is a little weird, though. It's Mecha King Ghidorah, which is cool, but man, he big. Normal King Ghidorah isn't that big. How'd he get so big? Lucky guy, so big and strong. Too bad he's dead now. Domination is easily the best game we've looked at. It is crazy fun. Probably one of my favorite games on the Game Boy Advance, to be honest. Super worth picking up.
Well, I'm just glad I got to end this on such a high note. Not all Godzilla games are good. Most Godzilla games aren't good. But regardless, I'll keep buying them as they come out. I love the Big G, and I cannot wait to see the new movie. Holy shit, that's all this was really about. Fuck, it looks good. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, sell your soul. I don't fucking know. Join the Discord server if you want to hear more from me and see me shitpost a lot about Sonic the Hedgehog. It's terrible advertising, isn't it? I will see you guys next time. Bye-bye. Later. See ya.